Good day and greeting to everyone. My name is Ibnatul Jalilah. Together with my co-authors Fatin and Lukman, I am pleased to present our paper entitled Reducing AI Parroting Through Process Portfolio Assessment. Let us begin with a simple image. This is a parrot. When we think about parrots, we often think about one familiar behavior. They imitate. A parrot can repeat words or sounds, but it may not understand the meaning behind what it says. This gives us a useful metaphor for what is now happening in education. In education, parroting happens when students reproduce ideas or text without really understanding, owning, or being able to justify them. The root problem is not simply that students use generative AI. The deeper problem is that many current assessment models, especially for research proposals, still rely heavily on a single summative submission. When students submit only one final document, the assessment naturally focuses on the final product, whether the writing is polished, well-formatted, coherent, and academically presented. Lecturer may see the completed text, but lecturer do not really see how the student arrived at the idea, how they selected the literature, how they refined the problem, or whether they truly understood the decision they made. So the issue becomes more critical in the era of generative AI. They can generate fluent paragraphs, academic tone, and coherent structure very quickly. So in this context, parroting is not only a method of dishonesty, it may also be a strategic response to the way assessment is designed. If the assessment rewards coherent more than evidence of thinking, then students may focus on producing coherent text rather than developing genuine understanding. For this reason, the response should not only be the surveillance. We need to move from assessment that tries to catch students towards assessment that supports integrity through design. So in this study, the proposed direction is process-oriented assessment, specifically through a process portfolio. This approach is guided by Vygotsky's socio-constructivist theory, where learning is understood as a scaffolded and socially supported process of meaning-making. In other words, students do not develop research understanding all at once. They need guidance, feedback, revision, and opportunities to explain their thinking. Through stages submission, iterative refinement, and documented progression, the assessment becomes more than a final product. It becomes a record of growth. Therefore, this study examines how a process portfolio can reduce the practicality of parroting by requiring students to show evidence of development, reasoning, and reflection. The study also focuses on both the development of written work and the visible evidence of student reasoning through probing and reflection. For the methodology, the study used an instrumental case study approach. The study was conducted in an underground research methodology course at University Technology Malaysia. The task focused on writing the background of the study section for a mini research proposal. The participants were 17 undergraduate students organized into 5 collaborative small groups. Their intervention was a developmental process portfolio. Students then were required to complete staged submission, provide article source evidence with DOIs, write reflection, and respond to a verbal lecturer probing during feedback session. Through this design, the study examined not only the final writing product, but also how students develop, revise, and explain their ideas across the portfolio stages. The process portfolio was designed across 4 stage submissions and 1 final submission. Students first develop the topic area, then gradually work on the relevant literature, research gap, and study focus. For submission 1 to submission 4, students submitted their developing draft together with supporting evidence such as article sources with DOI, lecturer probing, and written reflection. After these 4 stages, students prepared the final submission where they submit the completed background of the study section. So overall, the portfolio included 5 submissions in total, 4 developmental submissions and 1 final submission. For this study, 3 assessment instruments were used to capture the developmental pathway, not just the final text. First, The writing rubric. The writing rubric was used to assess student drafts across the 5 submissions. It focused on clarity of focus, meaningful use of scholarly sources, developmental across draft, and ownership and traceability of ideas. Second, the problem rubric was used to assess student verbal responses during lecturer feedback session. It examines whether students could justify their ideas and demonstrate conceptual links. Lastly, the reflection rubric was used to assess student written reflections across the portfolio stages. It focused on how specifically students reflected on their works and how they explained their thinking and revision decision. All of these 3 rubrics allowed the study to assess not only what students wrote, but also how they explain, revise, and develop their ideas over time. Here is the result based on the writing rubric. As you can see, student writing showed progress improvement across the 5 submissions. The green graph represents clarity of focus. It shows that students' ideas became clearer, more specific, and more focused from submission 1 to submission 5. The orange graph represents meaningful use of scholarly resources. It shows that students gradually improve in selecting, using, and connecting sources to support their research problem. The blue graph represents ownership and traceability of ideas. It shows that students became better at showing where the ideas came and how those ideas were developed across drafts. And lastly, the purple graph represents development and refinement. It shows that students improve in revising, strengthening, and refining their writing from one submission to the next. Overall, all 4 criteria showed improvement. This suggests that the process portfolio supported student writing development not only in producing a better final text, but also in making their thinkings and revision process more visible. Here is the result based on the probing and reflection rubrics. On the left side, the graph shows the probing data. The blue bars represent student ability to justify ideas, while the orange bar represents their ability to demonstrate conceptual links. As you can see, students showed improvement in explaining and connecting their ideas across the submissions. However, an important finding is that no group reached the maximum score of 5. This means although the student improves, their ability to fully justify and explain their research thinking still required more support and practice. On the right side, the reflection data shows how student reflections develop across the portfolio stages. In the beginning, their reflections were mostly descriptive. Later, they began to explain their reason, connect their ideas to sources and previous drafts, and justify the changes they made. Overall, the probing and reflection result shows that the process portfolio made student reasoning more visible. It helped capture not only what students wrote, but also how they explained, revised, and took ownership of their ideas. Based on the finding, there are 3 main points to highlight. First, for the discussion, the process portfolio helped make student learning more visible across the writing, probing, and reflection components. Students show growth not only in the quality of their writing, but also in the way they explain and refine their ideas. The finding also suggests that students gradually move from surface-level writing towards more focused and better supported inquiry. However, the probing results also show that articulating and defending ideas is still challenging. This means that students need continuous guidance and opportunities to practice explaining their thinking. Second, the implication is that assessment should not focus only on the final written product. When writing is assessed as a process, lecturers can better understand how students develop their ideas, respond to feedback, and take ownership of their work. This is especially important in the context of generative AI because polished writing alone is no longer enough evidence of genuine right understanding. Finally, the recommendation is to continue using process portfolio assessment with stage writing, lecturer probing, and reflection. Students should be given more opportunities to justify their ideas, revise their work, and reflect on how their thinking changes. Future implementation can also refine this model across different courses or disciplines to further strengthen students' academic writing, research thinking, and integrity. Here is one of the example of portfolio submission. Here are the listed authors and article that we referred to. So before I end, I would like to acknowledge Universiti Teknologi Malaysia for supporting this study through Grant Penyelidikan Baharu. Thank you also to the students who participated in this process portfolio assessment. And lastly, thank you for listening. I truly appreciate your time and attention. Thank you so much.